Calle Foster, welcome to Group Practice Revolution.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am super excited for this conversation because I have no idea what I'm going to learn today, but I'm certain that I'm going to learn something interesting. And I always appreciate when people are like, I don't know you, but sure, I'll go ahead and be on your podcast. So thank you for agreeing to.
Yeah, why not? I mean, what could go wrong? You seem like a wonderful person. I'm ready to go.
One of the things I have noticed as a person who's trying to help the group practice space is we seem to be having pretty serious generational divides. And I had been to a conference where I wish I should have looked up her name before we started, but a woman who wrote a book called Generations and, was sort of talking about all of the things that we see. And I was like, oh, do you want to be on my podcast? And she was like, absolutely not. So I was devastated and have since been thinking about, well, who will actually talk to me about this stuff? And a very dear person to me recommended you. So here we are to talk about generational divide.
Well, I'll tell you, I know exactly who the author is that you're talking about. Her book is a Bible at this point. So hopefully I can bring some of that flair as we, go through the conversation.
Yeah. Well, do you want to first tell folks a little bit about what you're doing in the world?
Oh my gosh, I'd love to. Thank you. So I am a leadership coach. I primarily help Millennial and Gen Z professionals and entrepreneurs as they sort of ascend in their leadership journey, whether that's self-leadership through confidence and managing through things like imposter syndrome and building your brand and all of that at work, to really like people leadership, right? So how do I become a manager? I was on a team by myself. I was acting as an individual contributor. How do I become a manager? Or I'm now stepping into my first executive role as a millennial, which millennials are executives, whether people believe it or not, right? The oldest millennials today are 44. So, stepping into these executive roles and, not knowing necessarily how to lead these large scopes and large projects and large budgets and really feel confident in doing so. So I help people really in all of those ranges, but the majority of the people that I serve are Millennial and Gen Z. And I'll tell you, as I was sharing that with people in networking events and things like that, people be like, oh, those Gen Z, oh, that Gen Z. And I was like, wait, there's something here, right? Yeah. I started to catch on to a little bit of a vibe, a theme, right? Message or consistency around some complaints, right? Some stereotypes that were being picked up. And I mean, just like millennials did, right? The whole entitlement reputation that millennials got very quickly. Yeah. That's now happening with Gen Z in different ways, right? And so I dug in and I sort of, as I was doing my research through Generations as one of the many books and resources that I used. As I was doing that research, what I uncovered was all this sociological backstory that yields specific workplace behaviors and values that we're seeing play out in real time. And it's not just coming from Gen Z. It's also what millennials have experienced, what Gen X experienced that makes their values and how they operate at work differently and how they operate with their Gen Z children impact how their Gen Z children are showing up now in work. And then also baby boomers, which a lot of people don't know this, you wouldn't guess, but baby boomers and Gen Z actually have more in common than you would think. The activist nature, the activism nature, for example, is something that is really prominent within baby boomers and Gen Z more so than really any other generation, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, could you, I don't know if you can like do this briefly, but is there a brief way to sort of like share a bit about what the generations are experiencing in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you think high level, Gen Z is coming into work. They onboarded during COVID, and so they had unique onboarding that was not similar to onboarding that millennials, Gen X, or baby boomers had. Right? They were in messy buns and gaming chairs and sweatpants, and didn't adopt the typical office acumen and behaviors through observation that other generations did. On top of that, there's some generational context there with their upbringing around more protective parenting because of school shootings and cyberbullying and things like that. And that created that really close parenting and the feedback loop that you would get from social media and from digital school working, like digital schoolwork, and like the feedback that you would get there.
Mhm.
They developed this need for consistent feedback, or this normalcy around consistent feedback. And so when they get to work and they're not getting it in the same way, or they're not getting the same level of hand holding, they're like, wait, I don't know how to operate. What do I do? Right? Where's the autonomy? This is too much autonomy.
Right.
And so that's Gen Z. Millennials, I'm a millennial. I definitely wore the entitled millennial, everyone gets a trophy thing, proud for a while. Millennials really like came of age or like graduated college during the 2008 recession. So what happened was, because they grew up on this work hard, go to school, and you'll be successful kind of promise, and then went to college and came out during the recession where there were no jobs available and they were under all of this mounting student debt, that promise fell flat. And so they had to reevaluate what work, what passion would look like. And now millennials are, later than previous generations, buying homes and starting families under unprecedented student debt. So their primary focus at work is getting paid so that they can pay off or be able to achieve these promises that were made to them throughout their upbringing. Gen X. Gen X.
I cling on to the tail end of it.
Girl, yes, please do. And what's funny, whenever I say it, the Spice Girls song Generation X like pops into my head, and I'm like, wait a second, but I, as a millennial, am the Spice Girls generation, but they're singing Generation X, which is hilarious. Yeah. So maybe that's like our intro and outro song for this.
There you go.
But so Generation X was their nickname is the latchkey generation. They came home at the end of school to empty houses. Both of their parents were working. For the first time, moms were working, right? And it meant that they were taking care of themselves a lot in the afternoon and in the evening, which helped Gen X really develop this awesome autonomy. So when it comes to work, micromanagement doesn't work for anybody, but it especially doesn't work for Gen X. They thrive in autonomy. And they also have high expectations of being able to do things autonomously for or that their coworkers would also do things autonomously. Mm-hmm. But what's so interesting is that our Gen X friends, our Gen X coworkers, are also parents of Gen Z, the very generation that we're getting frustrated with not having autonomy in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an interesting connection there, because Gen X and Gen Z are so close to each other. It's the first generation where they're calling each other their best friends, which is really cool. So they are really close, but Gen X didn't want Gen Z to have the same upbringing that they did. And so they became very close. And then that combined with, again, the protective parenting over cyberbullying and school shootings, and, the advancement of technology and social media and the impacts that those things had on the feedback loop and self-consciousness, it created this kind of overprotective behavior, which leads to, again, Gen Z being at work wanting more support, more hand-holding. As I say all of this too, Sarah, I want to qualify all of this with exceptions are guaranteed. This is data to help us understand trends. Yep. And if it's useful, we pick and pull what feels relevant and most helpful, but exceptions are guaranteed.
Yeah.
Right. And so as you're listening to this, and if it doesn't sound like you, if it doesn't resonate, that's okay too. Right.
Absolutely.
And then baby boomers, oh my gosh. Well, they set the groundwork for what the workplace looks like today. Standard hierarchy came from respect for military, right? And, just some of those kind of that Mad Men, like, male-dominated workplace vibe. A lot of that came from baby boomers, but also these like institutional norms that we have, and the need to work across different industries and across different leaders and organizations of different industries that are a little bit older, right, or a little bit more senior, that's when we're able to bring in our baby boomer experts within the organization and say, hey, we need help. What institutional knowledge do you have that you can pass down to us that we can adopt and adapt for what's needed right now? So while a lot of us are like, okay, boomer, right, we hear a lot of that.
Yeah.
Think about the value that they bring and the expertise that they have. And a lot of them today are not in it for the money. If they're still working today, many of them are in it because they want to contribute. There's also a lot of people that I'm hearing are rewiring. So instead of retiring, it's rewiring because they want to do something to give back and be able to support younger generations. So that's like my fly through high level, if that's helpful.
Yeah. Oh, I'm already hearing things that I want to pull out. So I think I'll go backwards from where we just were. So what I'm hearing, well, I guess this is sort of sandwiching the Gen Z and the boomer generation. One of the things that I'm seeing, and part of it is my own personal experience as a professor of Gen Z folks, and I'm just going to shout out my assistant, Lane, is Gen Z, and she Gen Z explains me all of the time because I'm like, what the fuck does this mean, Lane? And she'll be like, oh, this means this. And she's a Gen X in her soul. So we get along very well. It's really funny. Yeah. But anyway, so one of the things that I am seeing and I'm hearing from my colleagues who are managing some Gen Z folks is there's sort of a rejection of the wisdom that's come before, because there's this like, well, you guys did it and you fucked it up, so now we have to fix it. So I don't want to hear anything you have to say. That's an interesting trend that, and again, it's, this is kind of broad level, but that it happened in my classroom. So like, it's not happening. And so I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that particular piece, if you've seen that anywhere.
Yeah, I think it's on all of us, whether we are Gen Z or whether we're baby boomers in the room, to come at it from a place of like, not I know everything, but it's, if it's helpful, here's some of the lessons that I've learned, right? We know, me being a coach, you being a therapist, that when we tell people what to do, and if they're not bought into it and it doesn't resonate with them, then they're going to reject it. So I think one of the things that we can all do better is ask some questions to identify what the need is, and then share, if it's helpful, based on my experiences, here's what I learned. I don't know if that resonates with you, but take it with you in whatever way you will, right? And I think that that's, when I think about a therapy practice and I think about cross generations in a therapy practice, that would be a beneficial way, or that could be a beneficial way to approach kind of that cross generational conversation where somebody's internal desire is to reject whatever is coming in. I think it's on all of us to be able to communicate those things in a more intentional and thoughtful way. That's not, you should do this because I know these things, right? Some people will do that, right? We can't change everyone, but we can also receive it as, they're trying to help. What can I pull from this? They've got institutional knowledge here. And so rather than rejecting it entirely, I know that my gut is saying, well, you fucked it up, so we don't want to deal with it. Like, we don't trust you. We don't trust your message. It's, what do you feel like you learned in all of that?
Right.
You feel like worked and didn't work in doing that. Oh my gosh. And they will admit it. And frankly, they'll love to hear it and tell you the 15 miles stories. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and as I hear you say that, I do think that there's an impatience with Gen X many times of, like you said, again, to the autonomy expectations, right? Like, and being a therapist is an extremely autonomous job. So let's just say that, like, any Gen Z and, even the younger millennials that are coming into this, you have decided, if you go into private practice, that is an autonomous job you got to figure out how to do on your own. Nobody's going to be sitting in the therapy room with you telling you all of the things.
Yeah.
And so that is a piece where I think, I want employees in group practices to develop a little bit of agency and personal power around, because I have made this choice to step into this career. What other pieces, what things do I need to learn that go along with needing to have the aptitude for that job?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, what was coming up for me as you were sharing that was really insightful questions on intake, right? So not for
Mhm.
the client, but ultimately for the new therapists that are coming into
Yes.
practices,
Mm.
right? What are some questions that practice owners could strategically ask that would
Yes.
prepare them? And also having a North Star, right? One of the tips that I give my clients all the time is, I'm not always going to be there with you, right? We know that I'm not always going to be there. Like, you can text me, you can audio message me, which I know
Yep.
is different in coaching than in therapy. But
Yeah.
you can text me, you can audio message me if you need to. But one thing I would refer you back to might be this question that I use all the time, which is, what does your wisest self tell you to do here? So if you're
Mm.
in session, if you are a Gen Z individual that's in session, struggling with what to do next, you tap into that wisest self, right? And so that being able to provide that as a resource and giving them the tools to be able to, or not the tools, but the practice
Yes.
to be able to use that question and get really familiar with trusting themselves. Because I think one of the things that comes up with Gen Z a lot around that has to do with their lack of autonomy, or the fact that they don't want to have as much autonomy, or they're not as used to that much autonomy, is that there's some self-doubt or self-trust, lack of
Yes.
confidence in what they should
Yes.
do. So how do we build that self-trust? And I think that comes through from
Yes.
beginning to end in every way possible. What does my wisest self tell me to do here? So when you onboard them, when you bring them on and they ask a question, right? Some version of getting them to tap into that wisest self so that they can build that self-trust and build that confidence.
Yeah. Okay. A lot of things are coming up with this too. So, another thing that I heard before about both millennials and Gen Z is, I think maybe around my brother, we're in that like Zennial sort of like,
Mhm.
I'm at the end of Gen X, he's at the beginning of
Yeah.
the millennials. So we're both in the Zennial. And I think around like after he graduated from school was when the No Child Left Behind Act came through, and there was a lot more focus on teaching for the test than there was for critical thinking. And so
Yeah.
I've heard it hypothesized that the younger generations feel more compelled to find a right answer to things, even when there is not a right answer.
Yeah.
And that type of programming really goes against what a therapist needs to get comfortable with, which is not knowing, uncertainty, right? All of these things, like we were just talking before we started about, like, the world is falling apart right now. There is no answer for this. The answer is to be able to sit in discomfort and not know what happens next and be able to create community together. That's the only answer. And so, this idea around building autonomy, I'm hearing the extra leap that Gen Z and maybe even some millennials need to do to build those skills of self-trust.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And that it's so interesting listening to what is coming up for you as we're having this discussion.
Right?
But I think that you're so right. There are a lot of clients that I talk to that I think just experience a lot of black and white thinking, frankly, right? And
Mhm.
there's a right answer, there's a wrong answer.
Yeah.
And because of some of the self-consciousness, and I think that also comes from social media, right? Because of
Oh, yeah.
the self-consciousness that I think exists, there's also this, well, if I'm not right, then people are going to know.
Right.
I'm going to be found out, that it's going to be posted somewhere publicly and I'm going to feel shame, right?
Right.
And I think we're in this space right now, to the point that you made, where um, being able to move away from that right or wrong, that good or bad, that black and white thinking, because everything is on a spectrum at this point. Everything's on a continuum at this point, and everything is constantly shifting. That I think there's a lot of value in building that self-trust. The one thing that I would caveat or caution is using jaded experiences to inform what that right or wrong looks like, right?
Yeah. Discernment.
Yeah. You've got my wheels turning now. I'm gonna reflect.
Right?
I'm gonna reflect on this afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, okay. Have you heard of, I'm going to blow your mind. I'm going to get you really excited. Have you heard of the fourth turning? I'm looking over here because my book is right over there. Have you heard of the fourth turning?
I haven't, but I'm ready.
Okay. There's another thing that you can dig into in terms of like generational, like preparedness for the moment that we're in. So the fourth turning, this concept called spiral dynamics, which is a framework essentially about the evolution of consciousness and not just what we think, but how we think about what we think. I think that sort of energetically, holistically, we as a people are being called to raise our consciousness. And it might sound a little woo-woo, but like just for an example, the students that I was teaching last year in my classroom were so much smarter and so much better prepared than I was at their age. And I think part of that is because as consciousness has evolved generationally, kids now are like they're being born into a world that has more consciousness. And we can't solve today's problems with yesterday's thinking. We have to be able to think about things in new ways. And I think that that's part of like the tipping point that we're at right now is we're trying to still have democracy, and it doesn't fit us anymore the same way. We're still trying to have these hierarchical organizations, and it doesn't fit us the same way because we're different people than we were when these institutions were originally created. And so this is exactly why we have group practice revolution, because we have thought leaders like you who can come in and give us data, and we can grapple together with how the fuck do we figure out what comes next, because right now we don't know.
Yeah. And I think in these scenarios, it's what does my wisest self tell me to do?
Right.
And just to tie it all back, because that's what came to me as you were sharing that, is if I'm a practice owner and I'm experiencing an evolution and I'm experiencing multi-generational dynamics and I'm experiencing socio-political chaos, frankly, right? What do I, as a practice owner, need to do? And instead of feeling that sense of overwhelm, which is so easy for us to go to, right? If we do it and it's so normal, it's taking the deep breath and saying, what does my wisest self tell me to do?
And I'm going to guess that the wisest self isn't going to be a knee-jerk reaction. It's going to be something that comes from quiet, that comes from contemplation, that comes from relationship, right? Like a thing that I continue to call out practice owners for is making these knee-jerk reactions to things, right? Like right now, what we're dealing with in the small business space, that insurance doesn't pay us anymore. So we can't increase pay for folks unless we go self-pay, which that's just not happening in the Midwest as of right now. There seems to be sort of a desire for more transparency and what I would have assumed was more autonomy. But now that you're sharing this with me, I'm thinking more of it is actually it's sort of a bind that people are in with knowing that they need autonomy to do their jobs, but then also wanting to be told what to do. Like, and I see practice owners then being like, what do I do? Where are the clients? Oh my God, I'm going to focus on getting clients. And what I'm offering folks is like, let's be in relationship together first. And when we're in relationship with one another and you're leading from a place where your heart is, and not not losing all of the business things that we need to know with our mind, but like really leading from relationship. How do I create a team where people feel valued, people feel respected, people feel heard? The clients just come. Because I
Yeah.
gotta tell you, the practice that I owned, Head Heart Therapy, I'm gonna brag on Rael for a minute, who ended up buying the practice from me. They have not been shy for referrals. When I'm hearing every other practice is struggling with referrals, and I'm going to say that it's because Rael continues to lead with her heart, just like I started. So I'm just putting it out there. I'm not saying that Head Heart is the best practice in the world, but if we're not struggling for referrals, there's something to be learned from that experience. So.
Yeah. And so I would be curious, right, based on what you shared. I think that some of the things that are probably really common that create community within an organization or create trust. And this is regardless of whether you're a large corporation or whether you're small or whether you're a startup. I think the most important things that cultivate trust and cultivate cohesion is knowing your why. So being on the same plane, right? Being on the same path, understanding the mission and being aligned to that mission, bought into that. But now the thing is being bought into the mission and how acting on being bought into that mission manifests.
Yes.
Different things, right?
Yes.
Because
say more.
You might have the same mission and the same goals, but generationally,
yes,
right? You might, the way that manifests, you might act or operate to make that thing happen differently. One example would be is if you're in an organization and like the primary goal of everybody, regardless of the generation, is that they want respect. They want to feel valued for their work. They want to get paid for what they do at a reasonable wage. But I think, again, the respect and the feeling valued for your work, feeling like you're contributing to something, those are goals regardless of the generation. But how the generations show that they want those goals or work to achieve those goals is different. And I think that when we take that into a practice and when we take that into being a cohesive organization, what comes up for me is, again, being aligned on the mission. I think transparency is really important. And I know that when you are a small business owner, it's hard and it's a little bit scary to be transparent because the numbers aren't numbering all the time, right? Let's be real. So showing that creates a lot of vulnerability. But the best leaders, take a page from Brene Brown's books, the best leaders are those that are like the ones that are vulnerable, the ones that create cohesive missions where everybody's on the drive together are the ones that are able to be vulnerable and share. And I think that also comes into play when margins are tiny, right?
Yeah.
So
right.
It's hard when you're looking at these statements and you're not getting paid much by insurance and you're not getting paid much in your deductible, right? I know how much I pay in my deductible to my therapist. I'm like, man, I wonder how much she's getting paid by insurance, right? And so I know that that's a little bit scary. But I think that it's really important that even if you are a very green, very new therapist to a practice, that sharing all of that so they've got business insight is really helpful. And if I could name one thing that I think Gen Z is better at than any other generation, and maybe this is me stereotyping a little bit here, but I think their innovation and creativity is next to none. And so you have new members of your practice that are Gen Z. You guys are on the same mission. You're transparent and you're showing these vulnerable things, vulnerable moments as a practice owner and leader, but also financially, right? And now you've got these Gen Z team members who you not only are trusting to help and be part of the solution, but you can tap into their creativity and their innovation to be able to come up with some of that.
Exactly. And what I would ask too of the younger folks, so this is again another mission of Group Practice Revolution is I'm finding that there's a lot of distrust between employees and the practice owner because there are a lot of practice owners out there that are exploiting people. I absolutely know that's true. I don't hang out with them, so I'll just tell you that anybody on this podcast is not exploiting people, as far as I can tell. But I want to be the person who helps employees understand how the business works so the practice owner doesn't have to, right? So because we need Gen Z's creativity, and Gen Z needs to know, like you said earlier, what have we tried, what hasn't worked? Because what we're seeing a lot with the younger therapists is just like, well, why don't you just do this? Well, if it were that easy, guys, we would have fucking done it. But we've been at this for, over 10 years now, really stuck in some of these ruts here. So what I'm hearing is the need for willingness to collaboration for both parties, right? Every person, and this is the other thing that I've been seeing coming up lately. Not, I don't think generationally. I think just on the whole, when there's more uncertainty in the world, I think everybody gets more self-protective, which
Mhm.
then can manifest as more selfish behavior.
Mhm.
And I hear people when they want to make more money. I hear it. So
Mhm.
do all the practice owners, and everybody wants to be able to pay more. And as you said before, the margins are not there. In this industry, the margins are not there. I just saw a comment yesterday on Facebook with somebody saying something about, oh, practice owners must be raking it in. Like, no. Based on the amount of work that they're doing, they're probably making less than you are, actually, based on the amount of work. So how can we foster collaboration in a world where distrust is paramount? I don't know if you can even answer that question, but what comes up for you?
Yeah, it's definitely super meta, but I
Right?
think what comes to me as the most prominent thing is dis- if distrust is prominent, only do the things that build trust.
Mm,
Right? Stop messing with the stuff that like is challenging value systems. And if you have a practice that's highly sensitive to what's happening in the world right now, what's happening in the States, what's happening in our Chicago neighborhoods, right? If you are a practice where everybody is highly sensitive to that, be aware contextually of how you operate, right? So
yeah.
make sure that your activities when you build trust are conscious of what's happening around you. It doesn't just have to be
Mhm.
trust in your practice. It doesn't just have to be trustworthy things in your practice, because those aren't always going to be things that are showing up or showing up in time for you to build trust. But your character and how you
Yeah.
operate as a practice owner and a leader, your character can show up outside of your business too to build trust. If Gen Z values, as we all do, hopefully,
Yeah.
uh, quality of character in one another, especially those that hold our paycheck and our job, I think it's really important for us to show the quality of our character and to find opportunities to do that, because that alone, I think, will build trust in
Yeah.
those teammates so that you can be collaborative. So that's my
I love
taking a
it.
meta question and putting
Yeah,
my
yeah.
sort of practical context to it.
I'm into it, and this is a great place for me to plug my authentic leaders group. So leaders, I know that owning a practice like hands you your ass, and it is so challenging to do this. This is why I have the leaders group, so that people can feel like they can integrate. Like that's what I'm hearing really, is like integrity, integration with your actions and what you're saying and what you're doing, all of the things. So I love it.
It's great. That's awesome. That sounds like a good program.
I think so. I think so. I've gotten good feedback. Well, we have come to the end of our time, and I adore you. You're super fucking smart. Obviously, we're going to need to have more conversations and maybe even a workshop if you'd be willing to do that for our community. Who knows?
I would
Um,
love that.
yeah, that'd be awesome if we can chat about that. Because I really think that you have a lot of wisdom that a lot of folks can learn from within all the generations. So I just really appreciate your time. So tell people where they can find you if they want to learn more about you and what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Instagram at Millennial Leadership Coach. You can find me at callefoster.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn. Always reach out. The generational stuff has been some of the most fun additions to, or working on the generational stuff has been some of the most fun additions to my leadership coaching journey and I didn't expect it. But it has really given me a lot of knowledge and a lot of like data and facts and things to add to some of the feelings that people have about how and why we show up the way that we do. Why am I this way? Right. And as a coach, I don't dig into history and the past a lot with my clients, right? That's for your expertise to do. And so I take what we know about ourselves today and help people move forward. And I think a lot of that comes with the understanding of, hey, what was the generational context that I experienced that is yielding the way that I'm acting today? And how do I use that information to help me better collaborate and better understand and empathize with the other generations so that we can get along better?
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was seriously like super awesome.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me. And yes, let's keep talking all things generations. It's my geek out. Let's do it.
Amazing.